At 80 years old, Margaret thought keeping her home clean and peaceful was simply impossible. Her knees hurt whenever she stood too long. Her hands were not as steady as they once were, and most days she felt like her home was running her instead of the other way around. But one simple week changed everything. Just 7 days, 6 little habits, less than 20 minutes a day. And suddenly, her home became what she always dreamed it could be, a sanctuary of calm, joy, and comfort. What if I told you that in only 1 week you could feel lighter, more in control, and wake up every morning in a home that takes care of you instead of draining your energy? Stay with me, because Margaret's story might just become your story too. Day 1. The Morning Reset. On Monday morning, Margaret shuffled into her kitchen, already carrying the weight of yesterday's clutter. A couple of teacups sat on the counter. A pile of unopened mail leaned against the toaster. A dish towel was draped across the chair, half forgotten from last night. She had not even had her coffee yet, and already she felt behind. At 80 years old, mornings were her clearest hours. She woke up alert, her energy higher than it would be later in the day. Yet she was spending those precious moments and just moving piles from one place to another. The thought of tackling it all felt exhausting, and sometimes she would simply leave it for later. But later usually meant never, and by evening, the mess had doubled. That day, Margaret decided to try something different. She set a little timer for exactly 5 minutes. Not 15, not 30, just 5. Then she promised herself one simple rule: touch each item only once. If she picked something up, she had to make a decision. A bill went straight into her folder. Junk mail went right to recycling. The cup went into the sink to be washed immediately. Nothing went back on the counter. And if something required more than 10 seconds to deal with, she placed it into a small basket to handle after breakfast. In those 5 minutes, a shift happened. Her counters began to clear. She could see the surface of her table again. The air even seemed lighter. It was as if she had created space, not just in her kitchen, but in her mind. The beauty of this morning reset is that it works with the natural rhythms of seniors. Your decision-making energy is sharpest in the morning, before fatigue or aches creep in. By tackling the small visible clutter right away, you prevent the daily accumulation that turns into overwhelming weekend chores. And starting the day in a clean space sets a calm, positive tone for everything that follows. For Margaret, the difference was astonishing. Instead of spending 30 minutes just clearing a spot to make her oatmeal, she now began her mornings with clear counters and a sense of control. Her arthritis did not flare as badly because she no longer had to twist and reach around clutter. And she stopped losing important items, like her reading glasses or her blood pressure pills, under piles of paper. She told me later, "It makes me feel 10 years younger, because I stopped starting every day feeling behind." If you want to try this tomorrow morning, here is your action step. Before you make your coffee, before you check your phone, set a timer for 5 minutes. Touch each visible item once and either put it away, throw it away, or place it in a small basket to review after breakfast. Do not overthink it. Just act. One habit, 5 minutes, and you will prevent 80% of your daily clutter before the day even begins. Imagine stepping into your kitchen tomorrow morning and seeing open counters, ready for breakfast and peace. That is what Margaret found, and you can too. Day 2. The Evening Gratitude Walkthrough. By Tuesday, Margaret was ready to add her next habit. Evenings had always been the hardest for her. The day's little messes seemed to gather in corners, on tables, and across chairs. She would look around and feel defeated, knowing she did not have the energy for a long cleaning session. But this time, instead of dreading the evening, she created a ritual that became the highlight of her day. At 7 o'clock, just before supper, she picked up a small basket and began her gratitude walkthrough. She moved slowly through each room, carrying the basket. She did not rush. She simply noticed what was out of place, picked it up, and returned it to where it belonged. Here was the twist. With each item she touched, she whispered a quiet thank you. In the living room, as she fluffed her pillows, she thought, "Thank you for this chair that cradles me while I read." In the kitchen, as she wiped the counter, she said, "Thank you for this stove that still lets me cook my favorite soup." In her bedroom, folding the sweater she had worn earlier, she smiled. "Thank you for the warmth that kept me comfortable today." This was not just tidying. It was transforming chores into moments of gratitude. Science shows that gratitude releases endorphins, the feel-good chemicals in your brain. What once felt like a burden began to feel like a blessing. The walkthrough never took longer than 10 minutes, sometimes less. But Margaret noticed profound changes almost immediately. She went to bed calmer. Instead of lying awake, thinking about tomorrow's tasks, she rested, knowing her home was already in order. Her sleep improved. Her mood lifted. She woke up more refreshed. The physical benefits surprised her too. The gentle walking provided movement for her joints. Bending slightly to pick up a book or fold a blanket worked like a natural stretch. Unlike weekend marathon cleaning that left her sore and exhausted, this routine was soothing. By the end of that first week, Margaret realized she was looking forward to evenings. Her home felt like a sanctuary, not a source of stress. She said, "It is as if my house is saying, 'Thank you' back to me." You can try this too. Choose a time that feels right, perhaps before dinner, or maybe before bed. Take a small basket, walk slowly through your rooms, and return only the items that do not belong. As you move, think of one thing you appreciate about each space. End by pausing, taking 3 deep breaths, and acknowledging your accomplishment. It is such a small act, but it creates peace that lasts all night. Imagine drifting to sleep, not with worry about clutter, but with gratitude for the life you are still living inside your home. That is the gift Margaret discovered on day 2. Day 3. The paper piece system. By Wednesday, Margaret knew she could no longer ignore the mountain of paper that had slowly taken over her dining room. Bills stacked on one end of the table, old insurance forms buried under grocery coupons, a magazine half read, a medical note from her last appointment, a letter from her granddaughter, mixed in with junk mail. Whenever she wanted to sit down to eat, she had to push the piles aside, and sometimes she would give up and eat in her chair instead. Paper clutter was different from dirty dishes or stray socks. It carried weight. Every envelope seemed to whisper, "Do me later." And later never came. Margaret admitted to me, "I used to dread opening the mail. I felt like it would never end." That Wednesday, she began a new system I call the paper piece system. The rule was simple. Each piece of paper could only be touched once. No more shifting it from pile to pile. No more saving it for someday. The moment it came into her hands, she made a decision. She created 4 easy categories. The first was to do, meaning action was required, a bill to pay, an appointment to confirm. The second was to keep, such as medical records or important financial documents. The third was to read later, for newsletters or magazines she enjoyed when she had free time. And the last was to toss, meaning recycling or trash. She set up one small tray on the kitchen counter for bills and action items. And she wrote the due dates right on the envelopes. For her important files, she bought a simple expanding folder with 4 tabs. Nothing complicated. Just medical, financial, legal, and personal. For her read later pile, she placed a single basket next to her favorite chair. When the basket was full, she donated or recycled the older magazines before adding new ones. That way, the basket never overflowed. The transformation was immediate. Instead of piles spreading across the dining room, everything had a place. She paid her bills on time without stress. She could find her Medicare papers in seconds instead of searching through stacks. Her table cleared, and she started working on puzzles there again, something she had stopped doing because there was no space. The paper piece system worked so well because it removed decision fatigue. She no longer handled the same envelope 3 or 4 times before making a choice. She made the choice once, and it was done. Margaret said to me with relief, "For the first time in years, I feel like I'm not drowning in paper." Well, if you want to try this tomorrow, begin small. Set up 4 destinations: a tray for action items, a folder for keeps, a basket for reading, and a recycling bin for the rest. When tomorrow's mail arrives, stand right there and make your decision immediately. Handle each piece only once. Imagine sitting down at your dining table tomorrow evening and seeing it clear, ready for dinner, instead of covered in envelopes. That is the gift of paper peace. Day 4. The strategic dish strategy. By Thursday, Margaret faced what had always been one of her most discouraging battles: the dishes. For as long as she could remember, her sink seemed to be a magnet for dirty plates, half-filled mugs, and greasy pans. Breakfast dishes would sit untouched after she made her oatmeal, only to be joined by the plates from lunch. By evening, she was staring at an intimidating tower of dishes that reached over the edge of the sink. She confessed to me once, "There were nights I would just walk away. I could not face it. I would go to bed with the kitchen in a mess and wake up already feeling defeated." At 80 years old, standing at the sink for nearly an hour was more than unpleasant. It was painful. Her knees ached from standing too long. Her back throbbed from leaning forward. Her hands, stiff with arthritis, grew sore from scrubbing. What should have been a simple daily chore had become a mountain of dread. And the worst part was not just the mess, but what it did to her habits. She slowly began to cook less. She reached for frozen dinners more often. She ordered takeout. Sometimes she even skipped dinner altogether because she did not want to face the cleanup afterward. The joy she once felt in cooking, the joy of preparing warm soups, baking bread, or making her favorite apple pie, had slipped away. That Thursday, everything began to change when she discovered what I call the strategic dish strategy. The first step was simple but powerful. Use fewer dishes. Margaret stopped pulling out 3 different bowls for one meal. Instead, she prepared, mixed, and ate her oatmeal from the same dish. She lined baking sheets with parchment paper so food never stuck, and pans required almost no scrubbing. She even kept one lightweight cutting board for daily use, rinsing it immediately after chopping vegetables instead of letting it linger in the pile. The second step was preparing the sink before cooking. She filled it with warm soapy water before she began, dropping utensils, knives, and measuring cups into the water the moment she finished with them. By the time her meal was ready, most of the cooking tools were already clean. And then came the heart of the system, the 1 plate, 1 cup rule. Margaret chose a single plate, 1 special cup, and 1 set of silverware for her daily use. She treated them almost like old friends. After each meal, she washed them immediately. No exceptions, no saving them for later. Washing 1 plate and 1 cup took less than a minute. And because she never allowed dirty dishes to pile up, the dreaded mountain simply disappeared from her life. At first, Margaret wondered if it would really make a difference. But within days, her kitchen transformed. The sink stayed open and ready. The counters felt clear and inviting. When a neighbor knocked on her door unexpectedly, she no longer felt embarrassed. Instead, she welcomed them in for tea, confident her kitchen looked tidy. The biggest surprise, though, was the way this tiny strategy brought her love of cooking back. With cleanup simplified, she returned to making fresh soups and healthy salads. She even pulled out her old bread pan and started baking again. "It feels like I got a piece of myself back," she told me, her eyes shining. The physical relief was undeniable. She no longer stood at the sink for long, painful stretches. 3 minutes of light washing caused no strain on her back or knees. Her hands felt better because she was cleaning smaller, lighter loads instead of heavy stacks of plates. And emotionally, the change was even greater. She no longer felt guilty when she looked at her kitchen. Instead, she felt proud. Proud of her space, proud of her routines, proud of the meals she was cooking for herself again. You can try this too. Start tonight. Choose one special plate, one cup, and one set of silverware. Wash them right after every meal. Keep a little soapy water in the sink as you cook, and drop tools in as you go. Use parchment when you bake or roast. You will be amazed at how light and simple it feels. Picture this. You finish dinner, rinse your plate, wash your cup, and in less than 3 minutes, your sink is empty, your counters are clear, and you are free to relax for the evening. No piles waiting, no dread, just peace. That is the promise of the strategic dish strategy. It gave Margaret back her joy in cooking, and it can do the same for you. Day 5. The 10-item treasure hunt. By Friday, Margaret was beginning to notice something interesting. Even though her mornings felt lighter and her evenings calmer, little things still seemed to scatter themselves throughout her home during the day. A pair of reading glasses left on the coffee table, yesterday's sweater draped across the arm of her chair, a newspaper folded open on the couch. None of these things were disasters on their own, but together, they made her living room look cluttered and unsettled. In the past, Margaret would glance around and sigh, thinking she needed to clean the entire room at once. That thought alone drained her energy, and often she would just leave the mess until it grew larger. But on Friday, she tried something completely different: the 10-item treasure hunt. The rule was beautifully simple. Twice a day, she would walk through her living space with a small basket and pick up exactly 10 items that were out of place. Not 9, not 15, exactly 10. Each item had to be put back where it truly belonged, not moved to another pile, not shoved in a corner, but returned to its proper home. The first time she tried it, Margaret was shocked at how quickly her room transformed. 10 items may not sound like much, but removing that small layer of clutter made her living room look open and welcoming again. Her coffee table cleared, her chair was ready for her crossword puzzle, and her floor no longer had magazines stacked in the corner. The change was visible and immediate, and it only took her about 2 minutes. The power of this habit comes from psychology as much as practicality. The number 10 feels manageable. It is not overwhelming. It is not vague. You are not telling yourself, "Clean the house." You are simply saying, "Put 10 things away." That clarity makes the task doable, and the instant results create motivation to repeat it again. Margaret made it part of her daily rhythm. Right after lunch, when her energy was still steady, she did her first treasure hunt. Right after dinner, she did her second. Together, those 2 short sessions removed 140 misplaced items every week. Over time, her home began to stay tidy almost on its own, because she was constantly resetting it in small, gentle ways. There was another unexpected joy. Margaret discovered that cleaning became like a little treasure hunt. She found a library book she had forgotten to return. She uncovered an earring she thought she had lost. She even stumbled upon an old photograph tucked inside a novel. What once felt like a chore began to feel like an opportunity to rediscover small pieces of her life. She laughed one evening and told me, "It feels like I'm playing a game with my house, and I always win." You can begin your own 10-item treasure hunt today. Start with the room where you spend the most time. Set a timer for 2 minutes and challenge yourself to find 10 items that do not belong. Return each one to its proper place count them as you go, and stop exactly at 10. It may sound too simple, but do not underestimate the power. Imagine walking into your living room tonight, seeing clear tables and cozy chairs waiting for you, all from just 2 minutes of effort. That is the magic of the 10-item treasure hunt. Day 6. The Sunday Deep Spot. By Sunday, Margaret was already enjoying the calm that her new habits had brought into her life. Her mornings started with clear counters. Her evenings ended with gratitude. Papers were under control. Dishes were never piled high, and her living room looked welcoming. Yet, there were still corners of her home that weighed on her heart. It was not the daily clutter anymore. It was the hidden mess. The drawer she avoided opening because it was full of old keys and batteries. The top of her dresser that had slowly turned into a drop-off zone for mail, scarves, and jewelry. The medicine cabinet, where half the bottles were expired. These spots were not part of her everyday cleaning, and because of that, they became little pockets of stress. In the past, she would dedicate an entire Sunday to deep cleaning her house. She would begin with energy, but quickly feel overwhelmed. After an hour, her back hurt. After 2 hours, her knees ached. By mid-afternoon, she was exhausted, frustrated, and surrounded by half-finished piles. She would end the day guilty for not completing what she had started. But this time, Margaret tried a different approach, the Sunday Deep Spot. Instead of cleaning her whole house, she chose one small specific area. Not a whole room, not even half a room. Just one contained spot that could be finished in 15 minutes. She set a timer and gave that one place her full attention. On her first Sunday, she opened the medicine cabinet. She took everything out, wiped the shelves clean, and sorted each item. Expired pills went straight into a disposal bag. Bandages and ointments were grouped together. The few bottles she needed to keep were lined up neatly, labels facing forward. When the timer buzzed, she stopped. The cabinet was done, and she felt a wave of relief. The next Sunday, she chose her spice drawer. She emptied the little jars, cleaned the tray, and returned the spices in alphabetical order. In less than 15 minutes, a drawer that once frustrated her every time she cooked became a source of satisfaction. Week by week, Margaret worked her way around her home. The top of her dresser, the kitchen junk drawer, one shelf in her linen closet, the space around her favorite chair. She never tried to do too much. She simply chose one deep spot, set her timer, and finished it before she grew tired. The transformation over time was remarkable. Her home did not just look tidy on the surface. It felt deeply organized. She no longer dreaded opening drawers. She no longer avoided cabinets. Each week brought a little victory, and those victories built on one another. But what surprised Margaret most was how much she began to enjoy her Sunday ritual. She called it her 15 minutes of meditation. There was something peaceful about focusing on one small space, handling each item thoughtfully, and seeing instant progress. She even began taking before and after photos, creating an album of her home's gradual renewal. Looking through the pictures gave her joy and reminded her how capable she still was. This habit worked because it respected her body and her energy. 15 minutes was long enough to make visible progress, but short enough to avoid strain. Choosing just one spot gave her a sense of completion instead of frustration. And the consistency, week after week, ensured that every part of her home eventually received attention. You can try this today. Make a list of the spots in your home that bother you most: the junk drawer, the stack of papers on the nightstand, the shoe rack by the door. On Sunday, pick just one. Set a timer for 15 minutes. Work steadily, then stop when the timer rings. Take a photo if you like, then celebrate the progress you made. Imagine the pride of opening a once cluttered drawer and seeing it neat, organized, and easy to use. Imagine how it would feel to slowly but surely transform every corner of your home without exhaustion, without guilt, and without overwhelm. That is the gift of the Sunday Deep Spot. 6 days. That was all it took for Margaret to feel like her home and her life had shifted in a way she never thought possible. On Monday, she started small, just 5 minutes in the morning, clearing her counters and giving herself a sense of control before breakfast. On Tuesday, she added gratitude to her evenings and discovered that tidying could actually lift her spirits instead of draining them. Wednesday brought her freedom from paper clutter. Thursday returned her joy in cooking with the strategic dish strategy. Friday transformed cleaning into a game with the 10-item treasure hunt. And Sunday gave her a peaceful ritual, a 15-minute deep spot that slowly renewed every corner of her home. By the end of that week, Margaret looked around and felt something she had not felt in years: pride. Her house no longer looked like a burden. It looked like a sanctuary, a place where she could rest, read, cook, welcome visitors, and simply enjoy her life. She told me, "It feels like my home is finally on my side again. I used to feel like I was constantly fighting it, and now it feels like it is helping me live better." Over the next months, the changes only grew. Because she was no longer exhausted by marathon cleaning sessions, she had more energy for the things she loved. She spent more afternoons in her garden. She read more books. She invited her daughter and grandchildren over without embarrassment. She even started hosting her church friends for tea again, something she had avoided for years. Her stress decreased, her sleep improved, her energy lifted, all because of 6 simple habits that took less than 20 minutes a day.